going on, y'all? Welcome back to 8 Cubes. I'm KMBest, he's Lambie Series, and we are here to talk to you about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap. Number 1 on that list, Agent Venom Bounce. It has taken the metagame by storm. It is by far the deck that you would expect to see the absolute most, and it is the deck that sets the bar. What do you think, Lambie, about AV Bounce?
Okay, this deck just makes me happy. Okay, so firstly, Bounce makes me happy. Bounce has always made me happy. And then Agent Venom is just like the Bast that's like the better version of the Bast. Okay, let me just explain a bit why I feel it's like the better Bast. Because, okay, so in the past, firstly, Bast is a 1-1, Agent Venom's a 2-4, right? That already makes Agent Venom obviously the better stated card, right? Simple. But like, I want to say that like, what Agent Venom has going for it is that with Bast in the past, you kind of don't really want to just spend your mana with Bast because you want to hold the Bast, right? You want to wait for like the Iron Man to pop in your hand, the Mysterio to pop in your hand, whatever. With Agent Venom, you kind of really just want to play it the moment you draw Agent Venom, you know? So, like, if you draw it on turn 2, you slam it on turn 2, and then your entire deck gets, like, buffed, right? The way that Bounce is built. So, I feel like with Agent Venom, it's less about, like, I guess it simplifies things, right? Like, it's literally draw Agent Venom, play Agent Venom, which is amazing, right? You don't have to think too much. It just buffs the whole deck. So, you don't have to worry too much about the whole, like, holding cards and not spending all your mana, because the moment you have mana for Agent Venom, you play Agent Venom. So I feel like it simplifies things and it's also just a better card. It probably overall buffs more things than what a Bas would do. And I would say that like this is just overall like something that pushes the bounce deck over the top for sure.
Yeah, AV is a monster. This is a 2-4 with a massive upside when you build your deck around it. It's not just in Bounce, it's in Thena decks, it's in Darkhawk decks, it's in a bunch of different stuff. It's even in many of the decks trying to beat AV Bounce. The reason AV Bounce is at such a high demand, high premium at the top of the metagame is because it simply is the Agent Venom deck that outputs the most points. It's also able to wield tech against itself in the form of Shadow King, which allows you to put a ton of pressure on your opponent's board and also maintain the ability to get back if, let's say, they jam a blob or something.
Mhm.
Honestly, you're just putting out an enormous amount of points in a very unpredictable way, and Agent Venom Bounce is the creme de la creme of the meta right now, but that's not to say it's unbeatable. There are a lot of different things that people are trying to beat it, and the interesting thing is, I think they've actually been pretty successful.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing because you said one very interesting point, which is that like the AV bounce allows you to put like points in like any different place you want to, right? And it's a lot of points at that. I feel like that is just bounce in general
Yes.
that has always been able to do that. But what AV Agent Venom does for this is that it puts a lot of those points in wherever you want. Like it's not just
Yes.
points in wherever you want them to be. It's a crap load of points in
Yeah.
a lot in places where you want it to be, because you know bounce always kind of like has a lot of like cheap stuff in hand and you can just slam it wherever you want. So yeah, this deck has a lot of player agency and it's like a lot of points with a lot of player agency. So like perfect deck for what I like to do anyway.
There's a great scene from a legendary movie called Spaceballs, the Mel Brooks parody of Star
Baseball.
Wars, where the Han Solo character looks at his friend. His friend says, "Are we just doing this for money?" And the Han Solo character looks at his friend and he says, "We're not just doing this for money. We're doing it for a shitload of money." And that's
Yeah,
Agent Venom. Like, it's not just points, it's a
it's a
shitload of
lot.
points. And that's what matters. So now let's talk about what people are doing to beat it. The number one thing that I've seen people doing to beat it is these sort of Sarah decks that are similar in point output, but play things like Invisible Woman and Killmonger in order to tilt the matchup in their favor. They're similar in terms of the output they get from things like Hitmonkey, and they also play Agent Venom, so they get Agent Venom, Hitmonkey, Mysterio, Sage, all that stuff, but they have the ability to use Invisible Woman to blow up all of the ones being played. So there go all of your Silver Sables, there go all of your Demons, your 4-power Hood. And so you have this deck that has a slightly lower point ceiling, but a very good specific matchup into the bounce deck. And I think that deck is sort of policing the bounce decks right now. Like there are a lot of people, more people than I've seen in a while, playing unironic Sarah decks. Killmongers are kind of everywhere. Prio throwing cards like Ghost and Invisible Woman have never been more in demand. And I think the baseline Sarah strategy of just being like, look, I'm you, but I beat you. And though I am worse in every other matchup, I still beat you is a really compelling and interesting way to deck build right now. And, as someone who generally loves Sarah, people don't know this. My entire branding is me drawn as Sarah. She was my favorite card when I was like
Yeah.
becoming a streamer. So like my Twitter profile picture is me as Sarah, my YouTube banner is me as Sarah, all of the art of me is me as Sarah. And so this ends up being a really fun moment for me, but I will tell you I did not have fun playing either Bounce or the Sarah deck, where it was just like, oh man, I am already over these AV decks. That's crazy. Is that normal? Like, how quickly am I supposed to be over that stuff?
I mean, okay, so I don't know how quickly you're supposed to be over these things. I'm never gonna be over playing Bounce, but like I just wanna talk about the interesting
Sure.
dynamic between Bounce and Sarah decks. Like okay, so basically what Bounce wants to do is that Bounce is the deck that wants to like not have prio so it doesn't get countered, right? And then you just jam a ton of points in wherever you want it to go without getting countered because you don't have prio. Whereas Sarah is the deck whereby you also don't want priority, but you want to be able to counter their stuff. So you kind of want them to have initiative, right? So both decks are kind of like trying their best to not have initiative. And Sarah's doing it in a way whereby you run stuff like Ghost, and obviously you want Killmonger to like go second, because you want your opponent's one cost cards to be on the board so you can blow them up with Killmonger. So there's this dance between like trying my best not to play too much stuff and like making sure my opponent has more stuff or like more points so that they have priority instead of me. So it's just a very interesting dance that like has been ongoing for like in general Sarah decks because like they always want to like act second, They always want to react to like the stuff that your opponent has already done. And Bounce on the other hand also wants to go second, but it wants to go second to play a crap ton of points.
Yeah. And having this dynamic of like, I'm slightly less point heavy than you are, but very teched for the mirror is a
Yeah.
really interesting thing because this deck, the Bounce deck, has 300 games when I checked on Untapped and top 10% Infinite. It's not actually that much above 50%. It's like 50 point something. And that's because
Mm.
everyone at the top end of Infinite is like, holy shit, we need to beat this deck. We need to be playing everything that beats Bounce. And so we're sort of seeing a rise up and then a reaction to it that is pushing it downwards. Next up, Lambie had some opinions on Scream. I also have some opinions, but I'm going to keep them to myself until he gets his out.
Mine, I don't know how like drastic your opinions are. Mine is just a slight observation, which is
Sure.
basically I feel like so in the previous video we talked about Scream being like a potential 2/6, 2/10 because it's like +2 -2, right? But I think maybe that's still the correct way to think about it. That's still like the good stat line or like the good amount of stats that you want Scream to have. But I feel like the advent of Scream coming into people's decks makes people run what I call like cope cards. Like cards you would never play if you didn't want to try and play the Scream. It's like you never saw Polaris in any deck. You never saw Aero in any deck. But because of like wanting to fit the Scream into your deck, you maybe play Polaris, maybe play Aero, but it kind of just doesn't really fit anywhere, right? Like when does Polaris and Aero do like significant work in like the current meta? I can't really see it. So I mean I don't think Scream is bad. Don't get me wrong. I just feel like maybe the approach to trying to play Scream might be forced, like a bit too forced. Maybe it's just you're supposed to play a Scream, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, well, don't play cards that force it to work. What do you think, Cam?
Every time I've tried to play Scream, I have lost. Like, every deck I've played with Scream, I'm negative with. It's just not something that I've been able to make work in a real sense. And it feels like it's because it wants to be a sort of dinky mid-range deck in a metagame
Yeah.
where Bounce is just going way taller, and in like Hela and the Sarah decks. And like it's just like it
It's like
wants to
the
be
wrong
this
time for a good Scream deck to be around, right?
for a lot of the same reasons that Scarlet Spider was not a good card
Mm,
when it released. Scream ends up being sort of similar, where it's like this is a card that wants to be in a metagame where the numbers on the board are not as high as they are in this metagame. And right now, the numbers on the board are extremely high. And I'm not saying it's bad. I've lost to some Scream decks. Honestly, it feels like I lose to Scream way more than I win with
I
Scream.
win with
Maybe
Scream.
maybe it's a little bit of a skill issue on my part, but like it feels like when I win, it's very close, and when I lose, it's by a million. And it just strikes me as like your classic, like 45% win mid range deck that, like, in other metagames would have been like 55% win mid range deck, and they're just the perfect pick, always amazing. And now it's just like very unfortunately positioned right now. Scream is good. Like, the card itself is good. The package that it requires you to play is a little bit awkward and, yes, a little bit forced. In addition, they are gonna, as far as I'm aware, apply a nerf to it, which is currently Scream and Kingpin hit face down cards that are juggernauted, that is going to change. And I think that honestly, that is like one of the stronger things that she does is
Mhm.
scale off of juggernauts happening. So I am interested in seeing what they do to compensate for that because personally, like, I don't know exactly how many points that's worth, but like they could give her an extra point of power, right? Like if they take that
Yes.
away, they could give her an extra point of power. The other thing Scream has done is there's just a lot less move right now. People are playing a lot of Scream. You don't want to be doing move stuff. I see it still, but there's definitely less of it. I've got stuff to say about Hela. So we talked about the dynamic of like bounce and then the decks that beat bounce. And I have been operating here on level 2, right? Level 0, bounce. Baseline of the metagame. Level 1, beat bounce. A bunch of stuff throwing priority and playing Killmonger. Level 2, I'm just gonna play Hela. I'm gonna put big stats on the board. I don't care anymore. Like you've metagamed yourself into being a Killmonger Shadow King everywhere metagame, right? You know what that does against Hela? Nothing. You lose. You're playing cards that suck. Nice 3-5. I'm Hela. It doesn't matter. Cool ghost, dude. Like, this is one of the few situations where I feel like Hela can compete on numbers with the bounce decks. I think bounce is probably a little bit favored in the matchup if they draw right. Like, there's definitely like
Yes.
the snap potential is on the bounce player's side because when they're drawing, they're just gonna go over the top. But Hela is able to compete in those matchups, and it just absolutely ruins all of the decks that are trying to like, haha, I'm a tech Killmonger Shadow King deck. Haha, it's gonna be great. You just don't have enough points in that deck to beat Hela.
Yeah, so I have this thing. Okay, so this is very okay. I wouldn't say it's like a proven theory, but it's proven for me
Mhm.
personally anyway. Whereby okay, so level 1 is bounce, level 2 is Killmonger counter bounce, level 3 is Hela to be the counter decks that have less points than bounce, right? Because
Yeah.
what the counter decks do is that they invalidate the bouncer's points by removing stuff. Whereas for Hela, there's nothing to remove, it's just a bunch of stats that you cannot deal with, right? So the counter decks do nothing to the Hela decks. So what has usually happened is that like I'm a very level 1 player in this aspect, which is that I always just play the bounce. And like
Mhm.
I know that because the counter decks are meant to react to the bounce. If you know how they're gonna do it, you sort of can maybe play around it with the bounce deck. And then that's why you sometimes can like skill edge the counter decks. And then because you're playing the level 1 deck, you can fight the Hela decks just because your deck is also the points deck, you know. It's the bounce points deck, not the bounce counter deck. So like personally, I'm just very favor I favor strong very heavily playing like the just the best deck and then like play the best deck well so the counters are not super effective and the counter which is the Hela you fight with it in a fair fight, you know.
Yeah.
So that's my personal prerogative. I don't know what you guys think about how you guys prefer dealing with this kind of things, but I kind of just like to play the best deck, and I guess the best deck is bounce right now, so helps.
It was a real head trip for me realizing what this metagame was and what it called for me to do. Like, I was like messing around with stuff, trying to figure out something that made sense, and it was just like, look, I keep getting, if I play the bounce deck, I get got by the Sarah tech decks. If I play other stuff that's similar to the bounce deck, I get got by the tech decks. So what if I just abandon all pretense of it and just play the biggest guys I can? And that's
What if you
exactly what happened.
what if you just be a streamer and play the
Yep.
easy deck so that you can
Yep.
talk to chat, right?
I gained 43 cubes in like 40 games with Hela. I mean, like, that's just how it was.
Yo.
It was just like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I just get to make this happen because that's what Hela does. And it, like, I can't stress this enough. This is the best position she's been, I think, ever because there's finally not a target on her back. Everyone is building to beat the only other deck that can compete with you on points. And so you just get so many free wins right now.
I feel like I have something to say, but it's a lot better to say in two topics down because I think it's relevant for the
Mhm.
topic right after this one.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about Arishem, who I have also had great success with in this metagame. And I have, as usual with Arishem, it's like, I don't know if I'm just drawing well or the deck is good because, like, the sample sizes you play with, like, okay, I play 30 games of Arishem, I win 20 of them. Obviously, I feel great about it, but I could just be drawing well, right? But what I
Yeah.
do like about Arishem is that, like, every time I tried to cook up something to deal with all of the metagame, there were a couple cards I kept coming back to. They were, in order, Eliath, Mobius, and depending on how you think about it, you have Eliath, you have Mobius.
Cosmo.
I'm absolutely losing my mind right now. What is the other card that I built? Or
Cosmo.
Sandman. It was Sandman.
Sandman.
Right.
Cosmo kind of makes sense too, though.
Yes. So my tech choices in RSM were Eliath isn't really a tech choice, but like Mobius, Sandman, and Red Guardian were the ones that I had. Red Guardian
Yes.
hits a bunch of stuff right now. It can hit anything. It is never irrelevant. It's just always relevant in every matchup. Whether you're hitting a 4/6 Hellcow or a Black Swan, whatever, you're hitting it. Mobius is incredibly relevant because not only are people playing Bounce, they're playing Sarah to beat Bounce, and Sandman is, yeah, I mean, like, you want to beat Bounce, right? Like, you kind of have to
Yeah.
drag them down a little bit if you want to be able to do that. And I was surprised at how good the deck was. I keep going back and forth on RSM where it's just like, is this deck good? Is this deck bad? How am I supposed to know? What do you think?
Right, so you mentioned specifically Sandman and what's that called? Sandman and Eliath, right? So
Yeah.
I guess so to me these are what I would call like floodgate cards, right? Whereby you play these cards and it stops your opponent's entire turn from being effective, you know. So I feel like what Arisham does and what it hasn't changed, it's doing the same thing, which is that it allows you to play like multiple big floodgate cards, right? Because you just have extra energy. Like you can play the big card, you can play like multiples of big cards. Like you can play 2 6s, like an Eliath, and then play another big 6. You can play the Sandman and another 5, you know, like you get to play like the big blocker card and then you get to play another big card on the turn after, because Arisham just kind of like gives you mana to do that. So it's just one of those decks that whereby you can play big stuff, and if your big stuff just also counters like stuff like Eliath, then yeah, it kind of makes sense, right? Because you get to do like multiples of that. So I get it with the whole Arisham thing. You mentioned like 30 game sample size, and then like maybe you were just drawing well. There's the chance that you might have been just drawing well, because you know Arisham is just a power of randomness, right? A lot of the time, so you could be drawing the good random stuff for like 30 games. It's actually really possible. But at the same time, I don't want to take away from the fact that like the extra energy that you have with Arisham really allows you to play like big power cards that can like negate stuff, aka Eliath. So
Yeah, like when I was listing out those cards, one of the things that I tried to do as well was be like, okay, what if I could do that in Wiccan, right? I can play Pixie and I can play Mobius and I can play Sandman and I can play Eliath. I have all these
Wiccan
cards.
needs more setup, right? Wiccan kind of needs more setup.
I tried it and it wasn't very good. Like
Mm.
I tried, like it's like it feels like an obvious question to ask is like, what if this works in Wiccan? I lost like 60 SP trying it. It wasn't very good. I got it back.
But you kind of have
but,
to,
like,
you
gotta
kind of
try
have
it.
to draw perfect with Wiccan to get that to work, right? And
Yes.
having to draw perfect for the main game plan to work feels a bit like extra effort. Why not just play Arisham where the mana is always there?
Yeah, and that is pretty much how it ended up playing out, where it was just like, this just felt better when I was doing it in RSM, and I can just play an entire deck full of tech, and then sometimes I'll have the one that really matters in the situation that I'm in.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you might have something to say about this topic. This one is called Will It Settle? And what I mean by that is right now, we are experiencing something I can only describe as the Shadow King meta. Like the AV bounce deck has propped up Shadow King to like a ridiculous degree. Like there's just kind of an
Yeah.
insane amount of Shadow King right now. And that means that we're in like one of the more inbred metas that we've ever been in. But here's the question. Is it because the deck is busted, or is it because the deck is new? And that's the thing that I want to be asking about now. Are we going to be able to get back to where we were in this metagame before everyone was playing AV Bounce? Because I think Bounce was already very good before AV. I think it was the best deck in the game. Is it going to be like that? Or have we reached a paradigm where AV Bounce is so good that the metagame has to warp around it the way that it is?
I think firstly, yes, the Agent Venom has pushed the bounce over the top, and okay, yes, honestly, even before Agent Venom, it's been like a thing, right? But I also think that there's a certain amount of syndrome or like sentiment whereby this is the new card, like new card Agent Venom, bounce already good. New card Agent Venom fits in the already best deck. Why not just play it all, since like it's proven, you know? I feel like there's a little bit of the like, this is proven good and I can easily put the new card in it, so I'm just gonna play it. There's a bit of that for sure. But I also feel like at the end of the day, there's a good chance that you give it like maybe 1 or 2 more weeks, like the meta will just like change gradually away from Bounce, and then like maybe back to more Hela stuff, and then people like start to complain about Hela again, and then like maybe they nerf something again. I don't know, man. But like I feel like Hela, like because we talked about Hela earlier, right? And like how you can sort of compete with like the normal Bounce decks and the counter decks. Like if people stop playing Bounce, they get bored of Bounce, for example, then the counters disappear. Then the Hela gets less benefit because the Hela beats less counter decks because there are less counter decks. So like will we see a lot of Bounce research, or will we just see like a lot of Hela stay at that point, and then something new pops up, and then like that kind of thing. So I feel like the first thing to go is the counter decks, the counter Bounce deck. I think that's the first thing to go, because firstly that kind of deck only beats like one thing, and then if people start to explore and play more of other things, your counter decks win less matchups, like in general. So I think those will be the first that people get bored of and sick of, and like, oh, I'm not countering as many things as I used to. Maybe I should stop playing this deck, and then things slowly start to change.
Yeah, I think that is my not necessarily expectation, but my worry is that Bounce is just so prohibitively strong as a numbers deck that unless people are targeting it, it will just be the thing to do. And I don't
Well,
know how true that is, but I'm interested to see how it develops.
Well, bounce is a lot of points, but like it's still okay. I'm not. I keep going back to this example because this is one of those decks that I don't like to play, but it's just an absurd amount of like autopilot points, which is like, you remember those tribunal days whereby there's like just 40 power in every
Yes.
location kind of things. Like bounce cannot do that. But like, I mean, if you really just want to like be like super oppressive, why not play just a deck that just like wins every location? I mean, like tribunal is one of those things that just wins every location. Is that not something that could be possible?
Honestly, it kind of is because like we talk about the Shadow King meta, and I've been trying to
Mm,
take advantage of the lack of Shang-Chi because everyone is doing this. They're like Shadow King Killmonger decks. You
yeah.
could also be trying to take advantage of the lack of Enchantress and just like play Living Tribunal.
Exactly,
You could do
exactly.
that
Right.
too. Here's one reason why you might not want to play Living Tribunal. Although I guess right now, because the question I'm going to ask is,
Okay.
where the hell is Clog? Right? Like Bounce, not a great matchup. The Killmongers in all of the decks that are trying to beat Bounce also awkward for you because of the amount of one drops they blow up. Is that enough for Clog to be completely gone? Or is it a combination of that plus like Scream coming out and Scream Clog not really taking off? And so, like, I gotta tell you, I haven't seen a lot of Clog, and when I have seen Clog, I haven't been really afraid of it. Like, it's been fine, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just like, oh, okay, you're clogging me. It's not the end of the world. I can try to play around it. I also think people are getting way better at
Yes.
dealing with the turn 4 you're Titaniaing me. I'm just gonna fill this lane up, dude. I'm gonna win, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's happening a lot too.
Yeah, I think the self filling up your own lane thing is something that, like, okay, for me it's not anything new. I noticed this really early on, but I feel like people are, like you said, are starting to notice this as well, because like at the end of the day, Clock doesn't win with an absurd amount of points. Clock wins with you not being able to play cards, right? And of course, if you just fill the location that they intend to clock with sufficient amount of points, like it does take a bit of effort for them to actually win that location. Like a lot of the times, right? Like if instead of getting clocked with like negative power, you just play like what, 7 to 8 power clonk yourself in that location. They kind of need to put in some effort to win that without trying to clonk you, right? So like I feel like clock's weakness is it doesn't actually have like that much actually amount of natural points on its own end. Also, like, yeah, like you mentioned, right? So beast is like the natural counter to like all these like nonsense that your opponent throws into your board. And then now killmonger as well, which is, I feel like clock is just caught in this like crossfire whereby
Yeah.
it's not like people are actually trying to counter clock. People are trying to counter bounce with Killmonger, and then Clock runs a lot of ones, right? So like you just like invalidate the effort that they put into trying to like clog your bot. And I just want to mention also like something that KM always mentions, which is that like Clock doesn't want to play cards on curve. He kind of wants to like hold a certain combo and do it all at once. But if you're already not playing cards on curve, means you're wasting mana. You
Mhm.
waste mana, then you do your combo, which gets blown up by the Killmonger. So you're wasting mana, and your next turn is invalidated by a Monger. So it's like you're just wasting and wasting and wasting turns, and you don't even have points in your deck for the most part. So like I feel that's why Clock is like caught in this crossfire whereby like it can't even do its smart thing. The smart thing is hold your cards and clock them at once, but the smart thing dies to a Killmonger. So like it's a bit like sad right now for Clock.
Yeah, like there's a lot of Killmonger running around, there's a lot of Beast running around, and both of those cards kind of really mess you up. Finally, I think it's time to talk about the Vault, which is old variants that were only available in bundles are going to be available for purchase at a slightly raised rate compared to a normal variant because they are exclusive. I have no I bought most of the variants that are in these
Yeah.
for this first round. Like it's like the first I think year of Marvel Snap. It's back when like bundles were like a weird new thing. Those variants are now coming to a collector's vault that will allow other people to buy them. And frankly, my take on this is as someone who owns most of these exclusive variants, their value to me has never been exclusivity. It has always been aesthetics. It has always been the bundle value that they came with. I have never been a carer about exclusivity, and I do
Sure.
care a lot about aesthetics. Obviously, I'm the purple border guy. My aesthetics do matter, but it's not about them being mine only. I think it's cool that other people get to access this if they want.
Yeah, so I like this topic, and but before I want to tell you why I like this topic, so because I just also want to say that this will not become the podcast where we actually talk about quality of life stuff. We are not the quality of life podcast. We are the get good podcast. But yeah, no, I think this topic is fun for me because like I personally also care a lot about the aesthetics of my cards, right? Like I like certain variants, I like certain like borders and like splits on my cards and all that kind of thing as well. So I feel like the vault coming back, firstly, yes, it will be potentially overpriced compared to what it was previously. But I think we have agreed, or like we've mentioned on this like podcast before, that I think if you really want to monetize anything, you monetize cosmetics, right? Don't monetize stuff that like affects the play experience. And I feel like this definitely does not affect your playing experience. This is just like if you want to collect something that you missed, then maybe you're paying a bit of more of a premium for it. If not, it's impossible to get it from the past again. So like I feel like this is fine. This is just an option for like maybe whales or like people that like missed a certain card to like get it. So my take on this vault is like I actually think it's a good thing. Like some people will be like, oh, it's overpriced, but to me it's a good thing because if they didn't do this, I mean they could probably do this without the overpriced part, but like the fact that they chose to overprice a cosmetic, like honestly, it doesn't really matter, right? Like you can just not buy it. You can just really not buy it. But like if you really want it, they give you the option to buy it at a slightly higher price. I don't think you should complain. I think you should just like accept the fact that you can buy it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than not being able to buy it, I guess. I have
Or
seen
just don't buy it,
people.
right?
Yeah, but like I have seen people who are actually mad, like, oh, I bought these exclusive variants. And to those people, I don't know. Like, I don't really know
Guys,
what
you
to
can't you
say.
can't resell this, guys. Come on, stop being whiny. You cannot resell something that it doesn't work that way. You cannot
Well,
resell the thing
it's
you
not
bought
an
2 years ago for
NFT,
twice the
dude. You
price.
can't, you're not
It's
getting a
not, you can't
value out of
resell that.
this.
You
Just
can't
let
sell
other
that.
people enjoy the art, man. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for sticking with us through that video. I am KMBest. He is Lambie Series, and he's about to take us out.
Thank you so much for being on this episode with us. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.